All right, and we are live. Good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully you can hear us. We're going to be taking questions today through Telegram, so please submit your questions on Telegram, and we're looking forward to answering your questions. It's my pleasure today to be here with Shabeer. Hopefully you can see us both, and if there are any audio problems or if there are any video problems, please do again let me know in Telegram. So Shabeer, let's get started. Why don't you tell us about your experience at TechCon? What happened? And maybe you can even introduce ARM.
Absolutely. What a week, first of all. Oh my gosh, it was really exciting being in Silicon Valley and then focusing and seeing all of the excitement around on TechCon and the role that we were playing there. We were able to meet some really a lot of movers and shakers, some people who are doing some really big things in the industry. So it was a really exciting time. Non-stop conference. The week was really busy and exciting. We were able to meet with some of the executives from ARM. We're talking about the CEO, vice presidents, people at very high levels, and working together towards bringing this ecosystem of the future together. That is AI, IoT, blockchain, 5G, all of these things coming together. It was a really exciting and happening time. It was amazing.
They say fortune favors the bold, so you certainly were bold and audacious, right? You went up there and made sure that we spoke with the senior leadership at ARM and such. So why don't you take a moment and introduce ARM to the community? They've probably heard about my perspective on ARM, but what's your take on ARM?
Absolutely. So ARM is a giant. Many people in our community may already be aware of ARM. If you're not aware of ARM, I would highly recommend that you do some research on the company, and especially its happenings in the last few years. ARM essentially has a very strong hold and stake in the mobile chip design space. They're the biggest player in that area. So any cell phone that you have, for example, or mobile device for that matter, that chip that's designed there, it's a very high probability that it's designed by ARM. And it was bought outright for about $34 billion a couple of years ago by SoftBank out of Japan. So it's a very big player in that space. SoftBank itself is making many moves in this space and charting the future of the technology world, if you will. So ARM is a big player. Masayoshi-san, the person who's bought SoftBank, mentioned his reasoning as to why he purchased ARM from his SoftBank investments, why he purchased them. And you can see this is very readily available information. And I want to preface this by saying that this is someone who bankrolled Yahoo in its prime, as well as bankrolled Alibaba in its prime. So he's been right many times. He's one of the wealthiest people in the world, worth over $30 billion. So it's not just a Joe Schmo who's saying this. It's somebody who's been right multiple times.
Yeah.
He's argued that just based on the numbers, if you look at the statistics and you look at how many chips are set to be shipped out in the next 10 years, ARM is going to ship over 1 trillion chips in the next 10 years. And what that means is that the chips that are designed by ARM, that is. And what that means is if you do the numbers, he argues that in the next 10 years, ARM will be a bigger company than Google. And we plan to work with ARM to expand our partnership with them and working in collaboration with them. By the way, Masayoshi-san is also the one who's leading the Vision City that's happening in the Gulf. It's a $100 billion project that he's leading. He had a conversation with the Prince of Saudi Arabia where in a 45-minute conversation, he was able to convince him to commit $45 billion. That's $1 billion a minute. And there's the Abu Dhabi Sovereign Wealth Fund that's investing towards that as well. So what I'm essentially trying to say is this is a very smart group of people who have invested in a very smart company, which is ARM, which came out of Cambridge University in and of itself. So it's a very reputable firm, and we're very excited about partnership and being invited to speak at ARM TechCon, their largest event of the year.
So why would ARM be bigger than Google? Why would someone, clearly this guy knows what he's talking about, but why would he think that ARM is going to be bigger than Google?
Sure, it's a really, really interesting and very important question. So as we're seeing in our world, we're seeing the rise of software, and we've been seeing that for quite some time. But as we progress into the next 10, 20, even 30 years, we're going to see the rise of not only more cellular devices or mobile devices or edge devices, if you will, but we're also going to see the rise of, for example, robotics. We had the opportunity to meet with the CEO of Boston Dynamics. Maybe we can talk about that a bit later. And he's argued that robotics will be bigger than the internet in the next few years. And so what that means is a lot of things will have infrastructure and chips inside of them. So we already have cell phones and edge devices that have this, but we're going to have robotics and robots that are equipped with this. You have cars such as Tesla out now that you don't have mechanical parts. You have chips and devices within them that are integrated with software. So this hardware and software integration is going to be the future. And what ARM is really working really, really hard towards is designing chips in a way that are efficient at the highest level. And so this is why the prospect of ARM is so high in terms of overlapping or surpassing a company like Google. Because in the future, we're going to have infrastructure that's hardware. These chips are going to be so ubiquitous, numbers that you and I can't fathom, 1 trillion, 4 trillion chips to be sent out by 2035 or before that even. So this is the goal that they're striving towards. So if you do the numbers, you begin to realize that one of the biggest things in the future is going to be the chip manufacturing game. And this is where SoftBank has gone and played a very strong hand.
Wonderful. I'm just telling the community, we can't see the comments in YouTube. So if you have questions, if you have comments, please put them in the Telegram group. That's the only way we're going to be able to see, because you're seeing my screen, you can see that I can't see what's being written in the comments. So please drop them into the Telegram group. So yeah, that's really exciting. So, ARM unveiled a vision, right? What they're calling the fifth wave of computing. I mean, they're not the ones to coin the phrase. Other people have coined the phrase. So why don't you give us some insight, to give some context to our viewers. The first wave of computing was the mainframe. The second wave of computing was the server and desktop computer. Well, the desktop computer movement was really the second wave of computing. The third wave of computing was the internet. The fourth wave of computing is mobile and cloud. So now they're talking about we're entering an era of the fifth wave of computing, right? And so, I'm no spring chicken. I remember growing up when the internet was a new thing. I was online in 95, I think, right? And I remember when the internet came about, right? And then, it's like the world transformed very quickly when mobile internet came around 2005, 2006, about a 10-year gap, right? So I think, if there's precedent set in every 10 years, we're looking at a new movement now. So why don't you lay out the vision that was outlined there for the fifth wave of computing?
Absolutely, absolutely. So again, this was the theme, as you mentioned very accurately. The theme was the fifth wave of computing, and this is this culmination and this coming together of this entire ecosystem. That is the ecosystem of IoT, or that is the Internet of Things, which many of our community, which are in the technology space, will be well aware of the Internet of Things and how big that prospect is, and how much of a multi-billion dollar industry that is. So it's the culmination of IoT with AI, that is artificial intelligence, as well as machine learning and data science, and also the rise of telecommunications in the form of 5G LTE. All of these things coming together, creating this ecosystem that is the future of our modern world. And so in a world where we'll truly have communication, that you have devices and robotics communicating with one another in a way that we haven't seen before. So there's an accident, for example, that car begins to send a message to the cloud immediately to dispatch, for example, to communicate with the police department, to inform them of the accident, and also emergency services as well. But interestingly, and this is what we actually had the opportunity to speak with some of the higher executives of ARM about, there may be actually what we at Sparkster believe that we actually have a very, very complementary component that we can help with that may be missing from this entire equation. And that was accountability. That is, how do you keep those systems honest? And we believe the answer is blockchain. And when we pitched this to some of the upper management at ARM, they took a very keen interest in that.
Let's just take this back a little bit, right? So,
sure.
Why do so? What's the difference between, you know, these fifth wave devices and all this IoT stuff we've heard before? You know, I have a thermostat in my house. You know, I have IoT light bulbs that change color. So what? What's the big deal, right? And then why do we need accountability? Like, you know, we're pitching accountability. What's the big deal? So that's kind of two different questions. What's this IoT stuff? And you know, how is my light bulb or my thermostat, you know, really going to change the world? I think that's a prevalent question. You know, what's the fifth wave of computing? Because it doesn't seem like my IoT light bulb is particularly powerful.
Absolutely. Great questions on both counts. So one of the scenarios maybe that I can share with you that was actually discussed at the conference itself in the keynote speeches was that imagine a circumstance where, for example, you walk up to a door, and that door is a smart door, actually similar to some of the demos from Sparkster that you may have seen. It was interesting that they took this on board. In any event, that camera that's on that door takes a picture of the person who comes to the door. Now, this may be, for example, an intruder. Now, in that environment today, with the prospect of IoT and the rise of 5G LTE, which has enabled a lot of this to happen, the speeds and data for a lot of this to happen, what we come towards is a scenario where that information, that picture that's taken, is relayed to you as the user or the owner of the home. That picture of the intruder gets sent to you, as well as it being sent to the police department via the cloud. So what we're noticing is the hardware is getting more advanced, and there have been breakthroughs on that front. And also there are prospects for ideas to make these things come to life. Now, there are challenges, and the challenges come in the form of, for example, infrastructure. A very important point that came out of one of the keynotes from Jem Davies, the VP at ARM, was that Google mentioned this very vocally, very recently, that if all the users of Google Assistant were to use Google Assistant for simply 3 minutes, it would crash their entire system. Yeah. Meaning they would have to double their capacity. So there is a vision for where we want to go, but right now there doesn't seem to be a way to get there. Yeah. And this is where accountability really comes into the equation, where blockchain can help solve a lot of the problems that we're facing on that front. And what that means is you can actually, instead of actually using the cloud, the centralized cloud, which Jem Davies and other executives at ARM mentioned was inadequate, because the current centralized clouds that we have in the world today, they cannot handle the volume such as 400 exabytes of data, like absurd amounts of data.
That's just from 1 billion. That's just from 1 billion cameras, right?
That's just from 1 billion cameras.
We know there's far more than 1 billion cameras in the world today. Right?
Absolutely.
So what you're really saying is that you know, these devices, how they're different to the devices that we may already have in our homes, you know, light bulbs and such, is that they are able to make decisions. Because when we're combining the artificial intelligence, and most importantly, it's not artificial intelligence in the cloud. It's artificial intelligence inside the device. It's like saying, you know, your light bulb has artificial intelligence within it. It doesn't need to go to the cloud to process that information. And to connect these ideas that Shabeer is talking about together, you know, if we can't process in the cloud 1 billion cameras worth of data, right, then we have no hope of being able to send the data from the IoT devices and expect to be able to run artificial intelligence and decision-making in the cloud. Now, let me translate that into our speak, right? What that really means is that there is no choice but to have interactivity at the device level between one another. It really means the future of centralized computing is dead, right? Centralized cloud computing isn't the future of cloud computing. In fact, the future of cloud computing is decentralized, and it's the exact mission we're on. Now, did you feel like that was a message that was resonated from the speeches you heard? Or is that a message you felt like you needed to sell? Were you hearing it from them, or one way or another? I don't know if there's a bit of a lag between you and I.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So one aspect of it, as Jad mentioned, as well as what I previously kind of alluded to, is a lot of the discussion that was taking place at ArmTechCon was about this fifth wave of computing and focusing on how all the different parts are coming together. But in parallel, there's two discussions. The components of the ecosystem are coming together on one side of the equation. On the other side of the equation, what was realized is there's tremendous challenges on the infrastructure aspect, on the infrastructure side of the equation. The current systems are inadequate. And therefore, many of the keynote speeches actually targeted and said that people need to focus on developing at the edge, which was very interesting because we at Sparkster have been saying this since the beginning. Yeah. We're going to need to develop at the edge, that is with mobile devices and things that are at the end, because the current infrastructure cannot handle those things. And therefore, it seemed that we were right in line. And so what we were proposing at Sparkster to ARM was a truly peer-to-peer alternative, one that doesn't exist today. But what we're charting to and what we're working at Sparkster towards is truly peer-to-peer, in the sense that you don't have to use an intermediary such as the centralized cloud that exists today. You can actually interact truly peer-to-peer without an intermediary. Why do we need an intermediary today? And not only an intermediary or a middleman that's inadequate, that cannot provide the need that of the day. And that's really the fundamental question that we're asking. The fundamental question we're asking is, if devices can make decisions on their own, which they are, why can't they act on those decisions?
Yeah, absolutely. Why can't they act on those decisions? And so, back to this point of accountability, right? We mentioned this in last week's AMA. Imagine a world where everything around us is making decisions around us, right? The devices around us are making decisions for us, on behalf of us, around us. If there isn't a system of accountability, that's a scary world, right? Because imagine someone's life is put at risk. The traffic light makes its own decisions. Somebody's life is put at risk. How do we hold the device accountable? How do we know that it was even where the fault even occurred, how it occurred, right? And what this really spells to me, right, is that the future of computing not only has blockchain involved, it actually depends, it requires blockchain. And specifically with what we're working on, right, is that we're building a decentralized cloud that is amongst the highest throughput in the industry, right? I mean, I don't know of anybody else that can really compete with Sparkster's claims with regards to throughput. So I think we're a big component and a big factor in making this future a reality. And what I'm really excited about, right, is not only are we building the right technology at the right time, but we've got the right partnership, right, where that partnership gives us a vehicle and access to market, and where there's an alignment of vision between their senior leadership and our leadership here at Sparkster. We're all on the same page, and therefore there's a basis of a strong partnership. So maybe that moves us on to the next phase of discussions, right? Tell us how your discussions, and this is what everybody's tuned in for. This is what everybody wants to know. When you spoke to these folks at ARM, you spoke to the CEO of ARM, like speaking to the CEO of Amazon or something, right? You spoke to senior vice presidents, and you spoke to, all sorts of people. So why don't you tell us, who did you speak to, and what did you speak to them about? And what was their reaction? What did they say? How did they respond, and what happened?
Absolutely. I met Simon Segars, who's the CEO of ARM. I met with Drew Henry, the Vice President, Infrastructure. I met with Jem Davies. I met with the top management at ARM, and I told them very, very straightforwardly that it was very good discussions. Very, very excited about the fifth wave of computing and everything coming together. But there may be a component that's missing. The same way that we mentioned earlier, there is a component that's missing, and that component is blockchain. You can't have a juggernaut like IoT and AI and 5G LTE coming together and totally disregard or discount or not discuss blockchain, which is this huge juggernaut.
So
our future world will be.
So you went up to the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company and you told him, "Hey, mister, you missed something."
in some sense, yes. That's exactly what I said.
Fortune favors the bold, eh? Go ahead. Continue.
No kidding. And sometimes you have to do that. We're not shy about what we built at Sparkster. We put in a lot of work here, and we know that we're solving a real world problem. And after discussing with these executives at ARM, many of them realized that this is something that they need to pay more attention to, and they're very keen on actually having further discussions on that and perhaps researching on that.
Okay, so people want to know, right? So you spoke to these folks. It's been a week. What have you done? Or what have we done?
Sure, absolutely. So as part of the discussion that we had, by the way, we're already part of the ARM ecosystem in the sense that we already have an official partnership with ARM. But having said that, there's also other things that we bring to the table that we're actually able to offer them and their ecosystem. One of the themes of the conference was collaboration. Everyone understands that you must collaborate in order to achieve the magnitude of what's trying to be achieved here by all the different parties is so large that no one entity can do it single-handedly. So therefore, collaboration will work. So we already have one collaboration with ARM in the no-code space. What we're looking to collaborate with them now is on the decentralized cloud and actually enabling that and bringing that to a reality. So I had conversations with, for example, Drew Henry, Vice President of Infrastructure.
SVP, Senior Vice President.
Senior Vice President, that's correct, Senior Vice President. So very, very, very high up in the hierarchy at ARM. And he was very keen on what I had said and what we had discussed. And he actually has engaged his team to actually talk with us further on this, to develop some types of structure around how we can research this further and how we can bring this to a reality, that is the edge cloud or the decentralized cloud, and look around what are the prospects of blockchain and integrating that into the space. So I've spoken to Drew Henry's his team as well. I spoke with Brian Fuller, who's editor-in-chief of marketing at ARM. He was somebody who got me in touch with people that I spoke with, and we were able to connect a lot of dots. I spoke with Dr. Rob Atkin, and they were able to tell me those parties within ARM and actually directed me to speak with them and their team, and also the blockchain researchers within ARM as well.
So Dr. Rob Atkin is, in fact, the head of research at ARM, yes. Is he not?
That is correct. Yeah. Dr. Rob Atkin is an absolute juggernaut in the space of research and industrial research, that is. He's the director of research at ARM. He's the ARM Research Fellow. Very, very prestigious name in the space of bringing our IoT to life. So a lot of what we are seeing today, him and his team had charted out decades ago. So we're seeing the realization of that. Very, very prominent individual. So he took a very, very keen interest. In fact, ARM's research division, ARM Research, took a very keen interest and really understood the implications of what we were talking about when we were talking about the integration of blockchain into this fifth wave of computing, and how important it is to have security all the way down to the chip level and beyond, which blockchain provides in order to have a truly peer-to-peer ecosystem. And so the research department was very interested. So I met with Dr. Rob Atkin. I met with Brian Fuller. I met with a series of people of that sort. Jeff Chu, who's also a leader in the head of the infrastructure space there, and all of them have directed me to different members of ARM's research facility as well as infrastructure facility to have further advanced discussions. And the prospect seems quite exciting.
And so you're in touch with, these people, and you're having these discussions now?
Yes, I'm in touch with all of these key stakeholders at ARM, and we're actually having further discussions. There's a lot going on in parallel. Sometimes I guess our community is not able to see, but there's some really exciting things taking place.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, Sparkster was fortunate enough to be able to speak at ARM's conference, right? And I must say, Shabeer, you did a remarkable job. You represented us very well. And I appreciate you stepping in there for me when I wasn't able to be there. But listening to your speech, we didn't skip a beat. You did a phenomenal job. So great work. So, okay, so Sparkster speaks at ARM, right? I mean, surely there must be, dozens of blockchain companies speaking at ARM. There must be, right? There must be dozens of blockchain companies speaking at ARM. Is that the case?
Interestingly, I was informed by the organizers that we were the only blockchain company that was invited to speak at ARM. There was no other blockchain firm that was invited to speak, that got a formal invitation that actually spoke on stage, and there was no other. We were the only ones, and it was really exciting on one hand. And there was some pressure on the other hand, representing the entire blockchain community, which is a very substantial community. But I believe, based on the feedback from the discussions and the conversations that we've had, I think we did a fairly good job of representing the space. But we were the only ones who were invited, and nonetheless, it was extremely exciting. It was extremely busy time. At the speech and after the speech and during the speech, we were the most attended speech at that time slot. It was quite raving afterwards and during the speech as well.
So you're saying not only are we the only company in that was talking about blockchain or from the blockchain industry that was invited to speak, right? Mm-hmm. But how do you know? I mean, you're on stage. How do you know that your speech was the most or the highest attended speech at that particular time frame? How do you know that?
Sure. Ilan, the head of marketing and who was in charge of the event from ARM, actually confirmed that with me afterwards, after she mentioned that things went well, and that actually, based on the numbers and statistics, because they badged everyone in, everyone had IDs, as typical in any major conference, especially one of the magnitude of ARM. And they badge you in at the entrance of each event. This gets the data back to the team, and they're able to very straightforwardly tell which event was attended more than others. And so it was confirmed by ARM and their staff that we were the only blockchain company or firm that was invited to speak, as well as the most attended.
So some people looked at that video and said, it looks like there's nobody there in the video, and why is it that we only have a couple of minutes, and why isn't this recorded professionally, and blah 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 blah. So what do you think about that, Shabeer?
That's interesting. So it may seem as though there's no one in attendance because everyone was behind the person recording, because the person recording was at the front. But beyond that, there was actually no recording allowed. It was strictly no recording allowed whatsoever.
Wow.
And people who have worked in or lived in Silicon Valley, worked in Silicon Valley, would know why. And the reason is because the union that is in San Jose is very...
Oh, we're losing you.
If some of our are familiar with unions.
Could you hear me? Could you say that again? Could you repeat that?
Sure. What I was saying is many people who may have worked in Silicon Valley or who are familiar with Silicon Valley, they understand that the unions that are in Silicon Valley are still very strong. Now, for some of our viewers who don't know about unions, unions were established in the early part during the Industrial Revolution, maybe 100 years ago, and they were to give power to the people who are not so up higher in companies, people who are maybe on the ground floor, people who are not management. And so sometimes these decisions would be made at management levels, and the repercussions would be faced by people on the ground floor. And so it was to give the voice to all those people who are on the masses. Similar in some sense to the blockchain ecosystem. In any event, many of the unions that were sought to give power to the labor class have lost their strength. For example, in Detroit, the auto unions, which once used to be very strong, have lost their strength, and other ones as well. But getting to the point, the San Jose union labor force is very, very strong, and they strictly said that you will not have any recording in this facility unless it's through us, and they were charging exorbitant amounts. And so the fine and the penalty that they were levying was about $4,600, $5,000, or $4,600 roughly in penalty for anyone recording in any of the speeches. They were going to levy this fine on ARM itself. And so you can imagine through all the speeches and all the different recordings, this would have been a substantial penalty that they would have to pay. So therefore, recording was not allowed at the event whatsoever. So anyone who was recording had to do it very stealthily and very, candidly. It couldn't be something that was very open. It had to be something that was actually discreet. It seems that what happened was that, the recording had to be, that's why it wasn't professional. And the other component of it is, it got cut off. Well, it got cut off because the person recording was asked to stop recording because they weren't allowed to record. And it was as simple as that.
Okay. And so moving on to the last questions from me, and then we'll take questions from the community. What was the reception of your speech? What did they think of how you spoke and most importantly, the topic you spoke about? And what did they think of the demo that we displayed? And what happened after the speech?
Absolutely. So the community, we presented the idea the same way we've kind of been alluding to throughout this discussion, that all these components of the fifth wave of computing and the ecosystem of the future are coming together in the form of IoT, AI, 5G, LTE, and all of these things coming together. And we said in a very bold way that we believe that there is a component that is missing. And that component is blockchain and blockchain technology that must be in the equation. It's extremely important to include that. And when we actually showed one of the components that you may not have seen is the discussion around a car accident that happens. And in a car accident happening, if you actually integrate blockchain into this equation, you can actually have an electronic grapevine, similar to the grapevine that has existed for centuries between human beings. But this would just be in the electronic form, that information is being passed from peer to peer, from car to car, from road sign to road sign, updating the community and the ecosystem in real time without any gaps. And when we presented this prospect to the attendees, by the way, attendees were of the highest caliber because they were all access pass holders. Maybe these are people who had invested a substantial amount to be there, themselves or their companies. It was about $1,500 to be an all access pass member, and only those individuals could attend our speech. And they invested their time and their energy to be there to listen to that. And they were very keen on this idea of us actually having a true peer-to-peer alternative, which we were proposing. So after the speech, I was surrounded by a swarm of executives from Silicon Valley, people from Amazon, executives from ARM itself, other executives from other Silicon Valley firms and firms from Japan and Korea and all over the world, actually.
So someone from Amazon was there. So tell us about that. What did that guy talk to you about?
Yeah, absolutely. So Amazon was very keen on the discussion because, as you know, many of our viewers will know, many of our community members will know that Amazon is actually one of the major players in the centralized cloud space with Amazon Web Services, AWS. And so I'm very, very sure that they have concerns on their front based on what we discussed earlier. For example, Google Assistant in 3 minutes, if every user used it, the whole system would collapse. And so these discussions are very real for cloud infrastructure companies such as Amazon or Microsoft Azure and other departments. So he was very interested on this prospect and he wanted to discuss this further. He took my card and he was actually very keen on having a discussion with respect to how we can actually bring this to life and maybe integrate with Amazon and help solve their problems.
Wonderful, wonderful. Good to hear. I think that's all of my questions. Let's take some questions from the community. So Metronome is asking, we understand how big ARM is and its potential. So what is the perspective and cooperation between Sparkster and ARM? What are the timelines? And what did Mr. Seegers say to Shabeer? What are the next steps, meetings, no coding platform demonstrations, signing NDAs, etc.? So how do you respond to that?
Sure, absolutely. Now, ARM as a company was Simon Seegers was very interested, as well as was Drew Henry, many of the executives, and so we're in discussions right now about how we can actually make this happen and how we can actually realize this. We already have a partnership, as I've mentioned before, in terms of the no-code platform. Our software goes out with many of ARM's kits in their hardware capacity that they send out for a plethora of industrial use cases. That's already exists. But what we're working towards is expanding the no-code platform within ARM to use it, for example, in their development studios. Keep in mind, a lot of what people are working on today in terms of platforms to make coding easier are still developer-focused. We at Sparkster solved a fundamentally different problem. We said that if people can do spreadsheets, if people who are not trained in coding, if they can do spreadsheets, they can do software, and we solve that problem. Yeah. And so what we do is we abstract it to a further layer. And this is what a lot of people are interested at ARM is, hey, if we can get kids, if we can get high school students, university students, if we can get average people who are business users and enterprises and companies to be able to code their chips, imagine how much expansion you can have. So this was one component of the equation. The other component of the equation was the decentralized cloud and making that a reality. So they talked a lot about at ARM about the edge cloud, for example. And what we're talking about is we can actually help make that a reality by actually integrating the Sparkster decentralized cloud, which is essentially what you guys are talking about and what we actually enable to happen in a true peer-to-peer fashion. And so what's going on is we're having discussions with Drew Henry's team and people further down that route. Now, as you know, many people will know, a company that is as substantial in size and as prominent as ARM, you would want things to go faster. But I've worked in corporate Fortune 500 companies. Saj has worked in Fortune 500 companies. Many of you will have worked in reputable firms that are large. There are some checks that need to go through. Things don't happen overnight. But I think in a matter of a week, we've had substantial progress. And so that's really what's really important. And so we'll get more and more of that substance that you want around this in the next, in the coming future. But so far, the signs and the indicators seem very, very positive.
Wonderful. Okay. So next question. When is mainnet? Can you quantify Q4? Mainnet is at the end of Q4. That means at the latest, it will be the 31st of December. Next question. The community count keeps dropping daily. What's wrong? Well, I kind of addressed this yesterday. I posted some statistics yesterday with regards to engagement in Telegram, in ICOs and other Telegram groups overall. It's not data that we've compiled. It's data that's come from ICO drops. Community engagement and people are, in essence, people are leaving groups everywhere, right? The data shows that there's nothing wrong with us. It's the industry. People have lost money. No one's making, not many people are making money in this industry, right? A lot of people have a lot of their investments that have made a significant loss. People are leaving the industry. So with that happening, if they exit Telegram or they exit the industry, they exit us too. So I don't think it's us. I think we have amongst the strongest prospects in the industry. I think we're one of the strongest projects there is. And you've got to just look at, if you look at that post that I sent yesterday, the number of messages in the Telegram group that are being received in 24 hours in those groups there. In some hours in the day, we get more messages in 1 hour in our Telegram group than they get in the entire 24 hours. So I don't think we have a problem. I think we have a very engaged and interested community.
Saj, if I can add to that, it's a very good point. I met a few people, quite a few blockchain investors in Silicon Valley when I was there, and a lot of them realized that, given the market conditions as well, and they call these daily changes, noise or static, if you will. And a lot of them want to tune this out, and they're holding on to their long-term investments, but they don't want to be swayed by daily conversations and things like that. They would argue that this is called noise or static. And so they really want to double down and hold these for the long term. So that's another component of the equation that you may be seeing.
Yeah. So Jared Palmer has asked, what are our plans regarding ARM in 2018 and 19? Is there a step-by-step plan? So we are already partnered with ARM. We've already built a platform that integrates and interacts with ARM's hardware, right? We demonstrated that platform in the demonstration video that we put out on Monday. Now, one thing that Shabeer talked about that we made sure that our demonstration showed is the decision-making at the device level. Now, while there's no artificial intelligence there, it shows, decision-making at the device level, and then how blockchain can be used, right, to orchestrate across multiple devices in a peer-to-peer capacity. So the demonstration was really aimed squarely at, what ARM is saying about the fifth wave of computing, and secondly, it was aimed squarely at the ARM executives that were in the room, right? But I do want to make an announcement, and the announcement that I want to make is that this week, as Shabeer mentioned earlier, right, that there was a lot of interest from ARM research, right? Because they themselves are tasked with researching and figuring out how do we make this trillion device world a reality? How do we make this fifth wave of computing a reality? This week, we registered Sparkster Labs in the United Kingdom, a new company, right? Now, what is Sparkster Labs? Sparkster Labs is Sparkster's research and development facility. Sparkster's a research and development entity. And why is this a big deal? This is a big deal because, put the pieces together, ARM is conducting research in how to make the fifth wave of computing a reality, right? We want to be part of that future. And so we're forming a research function and a substantial research function. We will be investing in researchers that will be working on creating intellectual property in the realm of decentralized cloud computing and the peer-to-peer communications that we spoke about earlier. Now, why is this a big deal for you guys? Well, not only does this collaboration give us a clear vehicle and access to market and a massive partner, but I want you to think about another cloud computing company that's a decentralized cloud computing company that's in this space. One thing you'll see about them is they have a research-heavy team, right? And they have, and there's a company with a research-heavy team that has a valuation of $2 billion. Now, I think we have better technology than they do. And the only thing that I think that's missing from Sparkster's, from people seeing the potential and the value of Sparkster is a research function. So what I'm really happy to announce is that this week, 2 days ago, we registered Sparkster Labs in the UK, and we are taking bold and decisive action with regards to forming a research function and facility here in the UK. And there'll be more information about that as we make progress in that regard. So hopefully that gives you some insight into what our plans are. Our plans are to own intellectual property in this area and be partnering with the biggest companies, not only just creating research, but partnering with the largest companies in this industry and working with them and with our research resources to bring about meaningful and trustable solutions to these problems. And the reason that this research is important because it's about trust, right? Is ARM interested in the no coding platform? Of course, we're partnered with ARM because of the no coding platform. And the solution that we demonstrated is for the no coding platform. So absolutely. Maybe you can shed some light on that, Shabeer, with regards to what they announced, at their conference and what that means for us. What ARM announced.
Yeah, sure. So ARM's working on a development studio themselves and trying to make this ecosystem more elaborate. So as I mentioned earlier, they have understood that development needs to be focused towards the edge, and there are going to be more devices. We're talking about 4 trillion devices in the next few years, and what that means is you're going to need people to develop on those. And in fact, one of the discussions that took place, one of the substantial discussions that took place at ARM TechCon was that there may not be enough developers in order to program trillions of devices. So how do you solve that problem? So they work towards a development studio, but that's all developer focused. People who already know how to program or already know how to code, making it easier for them. And they're very interested in the prospect of using Sparkster even more throughout the firm in order to get people to code at the chip level and be able to develop at the chip level. Our entire demonstration utilized our ARM chips, and so we already have a substantial partnership and relationship with them. But what we realized there after going to the convention and to the event was that there's a lot of other areas that we can actually help ARM with, and they actually seem quite interested to take that on board.
Absolutely. So the next question, almost all young people are involved in e-gaming. Thus, the future will be centralized on e-gaming and e-gaming related commerce. How will Sparkster participate in e-gaming? I'll take this one. So this was discussed to some degree in my interview with the real guy or the regular guy. So what I kind of said, and I'll reiterate here, is that our decentralized cloud solves the problem of how to communicate large amounts of data in parallel amongst a large number of people, right? In a decentralized way, of course. So one of the easiest ways that we can, or one of the quickest ways that we might be able to contribute to the e-gaming world is by allowing people to play massive multiplayer games. So as I mentioned in that interview, right, if you imagine a map, or you imagine, I don't know, some game that you're playing, if there's thousands of people that are on the same field, on the same map, whatever it might be, all that communication about people's positions and how much armor someone has and what their health status is and what direction they're moving in and what speed they're moving in and whether they jump up and down. All that information needs to be communicated to all the people around that person that are in that vicinity of that map, right? And maybe sometimes needs to be communicated to everybody who's on the map. I think that Sparkster has a lot to contribute in how we can make that easier, make that cheaper, make that much more scalable, allow people to play much bigger games without latency and such. So I think that's one of the most direct ways. So yeah. Anastasia is asking, where are these senior ARMs? Where are the ARM senior executives based, and at what level are we guys communicating with ARM right now?
Sure. Great question. So ARM senior executive staff are based in Cambridge, predominantly Cambridge, UK. As I mentioned earlier, ARM actually came out of Cambridge University, very prominent institution where you had obviously the likes of Newton and Stephen Hawking and the like. So predominantly they're based in Cambridge. They also have a very, very substantial presence in Austin, Texas. For those who are in American space, they know that there are certain tech ecosystems that are very prominent in the U.S. One of them is obviously Silicon Valley. Another is Boston, Massachusetts. And two of the biggest up and coming ones are Denver, and at the peak of it, Austin, Texas. So they have a very big presence, about 800 employees, 850 employees in Austin. So they have a lot of people there, especially in the research division, but also executives. And also many of them are in Japan as well. So many of the people that I spoke to were in Cambridge or Austin predominantly, or in Silicon Valley as well, San Jose. So these are most of the people that I interacted with. I also met a couple of people who are based out of Tokyo as well. And so I'm conversing with people in Cambridge, as well as Austin, as well as San Jose, and as well as Japan.
And it's important to note that ARM is a very big company. Here
Yes.
in Cambridge alone, they have 6,000 employees. And I don't believe this is their largest site. Is that true?
This is not so. So it's a very interesting point that you raised. So this is very important. When just a little bit of background. If many of our viewers or many of our community members may not be aware of this, but ARM was acquired a few years ago by Masayoshi-san from SoftBank. Now, ARM is a sort of a crown jewel of enterprises and software and technology companies in the United Kingdom, and so there been a precedent in the past where companies took or bought intellectual property or bought companies from the United Kingdom and just took them abroad. And so the UK government was actually quite reluctant. So Masayoshi-san promised that when I buy SoftBank, I'm going to double the employment in the UK and its presence and the number of employees in the next few years, which he delivered on. And so what I'm also saying is that ARM is going to expand tremendously in the next 5 and 10 years, to the point that it's going to be double, triple, quadruple in size. So that is a very, very rapidly growing company.
Wonderful. Okay. Usman Shirazi is asking, after the launch of Mainnet, Sparkster's decentralized cloud will be ready to provide services to big firms like Uber. If big firms like Uber, I think that we can make a tremendous difference to big firms like Uber. And will Uber be able to, run its services across our network? Yeah, I think that we'll be ready to be able to support that. That's why we built this network, right? And why we're building it. You guys probably want an update on kind of where are we in the development process of the decentralized cloud. So this week, I would say, by the end of this month, we will be in a place, in the next few days, we'll be in a place where the master node is complete, the storage nodes are complete, the compute nodes are complete, the verification nodes are complete. That means that coding has been finished on those components. Now we're moving into the stage of integrating those components and facilitating communication and how they work together with one another, which is what we're going to be spending the next several weeks working on. It's a tight deadline to Q4, the end of Q4, but we believe we're going to make it. I'm just looking up some more questions. How can Spark, so Ziad is asking, how can Spark tokens benefit from ARM's partnership? What do you think about that, Shabeer?
Wow. So how can Spark tokens benefit from ARM partnership? Now, it's all about solving, we fundamentally believe at Sparkster that it's about solving real world problems. And that's why from the beginning we set out on solving real world problems for what we were doing at Sparkster, for the real world. And so ARM is a company that has been and is solving real world problems. Every device, I don't know if I made this clear enough earlier, but essentially every mobile device, about 90% of the mobile microchip design is actually conducted by ARM. That means if you have an Android device, an Apple device, whatever device you have as a cell phone, for example, or a mobile phone, that has something that is touching it that is ARM-based. If you have a car, for example, a vehicle, the amount of chips that go into those vehicles, or the amount of chips that are going to go into future vehicles, such as Tesla and the future of it. I was visiting a Tesla dealership that I saw, and what they were saying was very interesting. They said that you probably want to buy a Tesla right now, and I was like, why? And they said that, you probably want to buy a Tesla right now because your next car is going to be a Tesla anyways. And so the argument that they were saying here is that all cars are going to be like this in the future. And so what you have in those cars is a battery and a bunch of chips and software that runs those chips. And so ARM is the company that's at the forefront of making that a reality. And so a partnership of ARM would have a substantial impact, working with ARM, not only our partnership that we already have, but expanding that partnership into the decentralized cloud and all that. It could have a substantial impact.
I'm gonna give you a very simple response to this, right? There's a very, very specific reason that we're going to be investing capital in building a research function, and collaborate with the ARM team in this research. 1 trillion devices from ARM come online in the next 10 years. 1 trillion devices come online in the next 10 years. And we will be building the technology to support those trillion devices coming online, to be able to communicate with one another over our cloud. If we're successful, we will be the next Amazon. Except we won't be an Amazon for, I don't know how many customers they have, but let's say it's 10 million customers, for example. We won't be the network across which 10 million customers do business. We will be the network across which trillions of devices are communicating and interacting with one another. If we're successful in this regard, and what will be underpin all this communication, naturally, will have to be the Sparkster token, right? So it's an extremely bright future, and all we can say to you guys, right, because nobody's seen the future, but what we can say to you guys is we're taking every step possible. We're working day and night here, right? And we're making the most forward-thinking decisions that we can make about how to utilize the capital we have to be able to realize the opportunities as we see them today, to position ourselves and to gear Sparkster for creating and manifesting the future, right? And we're only here because you guys have given us the opportunity to do so. So, we're in this together. We're partners in realizing this future, right? So Metronome, thank you for the kind words, Metronome. He's asking that we have so much work ahead of us. Are we planning to expand the team in the near future? Yes, absolutely. We have to expand the team. We're stretched. But, obviously with our ETH being locked up, we're limited, and we have to be very prudent about where and how we invest and how we grow the team. So we're choosing to invest the resources that we have in the research function, because, that presents the fastest way, in our opinion, to a multi-billion-dollar business. So, Shabeer, anything else you want to say? I think we'll leave it there for our questions. It's been approximately an hour. Any last words? Anything you want to, it's not often that the community get to hear from you. So any last words that you want to leave the community with, and thoughts you'd like to share with them?
Sure. I do appreciate this time, and I do, I do enjoy spending this time and getting you guys updates. Sometimes we just have our heads down and we're working towards our goals, and we don't really get the time, or I don't get the time to really pause and let you guys know about all the updates and things that are happening. But rest assured, we have your best interest in mind, our team's best interest in mind, and we put in a lot of work here, and we are continuing to do it. There are some really, really, really exciting things.
We lost you there, Shabeer.
Excited about the future that we're building here. Yeah, I was just saying that we're really excited. We have some very interesting things on the horizon. Sometimes I'm not able to let you know about all of the things that are happening because there is so much. But rest assured, we're going to continue communicating with you and let you know about the big breakthroughs, and keep an ear out for it. And we look forward to building a strong future with you.
Absolutely, absolutely. So everybody, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to be here with you guys today. Shabeer, thank you for joining us. I'm sure the community is very grateful, and we will catch you guys next week. Have a lovely week ahead, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.